Hey guys, welcome back. Thank you for being here with me today as I go through my May reads. If you didn't watch my previous video, I pretty much went through my Goodreads TBR, the long list that I have on there of books I want to read, and I selected 6 of the books that have been there the longest. Years. They've been on there for years. They've just been sitting there unread, unhappy, and I figured it's finally time to pull the plug and read them. These are those 6 books. I filmed that about a week ago, and I have since made some progress. So let's talk about it. The first book that I read is When We Were Orphans by Kazuo Ishiguro. I've read, what was the book? Never Let Me Go by this author. That's the only book of his I've read. I know he has several out. I really enjoyed that one, and I really enjoyed this one. We are kicking the month off with a 4-star read. This is probably like more of like a 3.75 if we want to get really technical about it, but I bumped it up to a 4 just because I felt really bad giving it a 3-star because it was better than that. When We Were Orphans is the story of a man. His name is Christopher. He grew up in Shanghai, but he is the son of English parents. And his parents were kidnapped, possibly killed. They disappeared when he was a young boy in Shanghai, and he was sent to live in England. We go through his life when he's an adult. He has become a detective. He's really well known. He solves lots of cases. He's very popular. And he returns to Shanghai to try and solve his parents' murder. This isn't really a book that you read for the plot. The plot wasn't at all what kept me interested. It wasn't like I was like turning the pages like, I have to know what happened, who did it. Because we get very little of the actual detective work. Any sort of investigation, it kind of happens off screen. It doesn't really play a part into it. But the author, is so good at just like dropping you inside someone's head. And the main character, he's not this like crazy, unusual, really unique guy. He's just like a very everyday, mundane man. But the writing is just, it flows so well and it's so effortless. A lot of the book is kind of more political, the issues between China and Japan in the past, which I know there's a long history of and persists to this day. I do wish I had known more specifically in like the time that this is written, what was going on, because some of that, like I knew there was conflict, but a lot of it kind of went over my head because I didn't know the specifics of it. The only negative, if you want to call it that, is it does feel a bit disjointed. The first half and the second half, to me, it felt like the character went through some sudden like personality shift in the second half, and some of the choices he started making just didn't make sense or didn't correlate with who he was in the first half of the book, but it was a largely positive reading experience for me. I really want to read more of this author's work. Both books have been, I think, 4 stars. I think Never Let Me Go was a 4 or 5 star. So we are off to such a great start. And you know what? We're continuing with Hamnet by Maggie O'Farrell. I finally read it. Finally, I have heard so much about this book ever since it was published. People talk about how it made them cry and cut them so deep, and the grief and the death and the crying. I really enjoyed it. 4 star again. However, I did not have the reading experience based on so much of what I heard that I thought I was going to. For me, I don't know if this is going to make any sense, but witnessing kind of the grief and the loss in this book was more like kind of like a distant ache rather than the like a immediate sharp sting. Does that make sense? For those of you who have been living under a rock the last few years, Hamnet is about the death of Shakespeare's son, told mostly through the lens of his wife Agnes, or more commonly known as Anne Hathaway. So Hamnet it's not really known how he died specifically, but Maggie O'Farrell chose to show his death as being caused from the plague, which was kind of rampant in London and the surrounding areas at this time. When we think of kind of historical figures, well-known historical figures from long ago, we think of like the old black and white photos and maybe like a list of their accomplishments, but it's very much removed from us. But Maggie O'Farrell did such a good job at bringing like color and texture into their everyday lives and being able to imagine kind of ourselves in their position. She showcased those just universal human emotions about being a parent and being a wife or a husband and losing a child and going through the process of grief and, you know, having terrible in-laws. It was so good. I really enjoyed how she wrote the characters. Agnes was this kind of not really like a wild child, but for a woman of this time period might have been a little off because she enjoyed spending so much more time in the forest and had, you know, some superstitious beliefs. And it went through her and Shakespeare's childhoods, not happy childhoods, how they met, how they had kids together, him going off to London and writing plays, and it just spanned so many years. But the flow was really good. The writing was fantastic. I would highly recommend this. It was great. And I think next, so I have 4 left. I think I'm gonna try and read Ninth House next. Let's not throw the books all over. This is Dark Academia. This is my first Leigh Bardugo book I've read. I know she's got several of like the Grisha verse, I think it's called, that are really popular. Six of Crows and what's the other one? Shadow and Bone. Are they both in the same universe? I don't know. But I think this takes place in our universe at Yale. I've put this off for a while because I don't know if I like Dark Academia. I've read a few of them and I've had kind of middling experiences, but we're going to give this a good try. A miracle has occurred. The 4-star streak is still alive with Ninth House. I just finished this book and I liked it so much more than I thought I was going to. This was a really pleasant surprise, and I am super excited to read the sequel, Hellbent, which I do own, which is so great. So this, as I mentioned before, it's Dark Academia book, and we follow a character whose name is Alex. Alex is a new student at Yale, and when you think of Yale student, she's probably not what would typically come to mind. She's a high school dropout. She's been in and out of trouble her whole life, and she is the sole survivor of a really violent, multiple homicide. 3 or 4 people were killed in a very gruesome manner, and she is the only one who was left alive. Now, Alex was inducted into Yale because she can see greys, which are basically ghosts, and that makes her very useful to the secret societies that exist at Yale that each kind of harness magic in different ways. Now, Alex is in the house, I think it's called Lethe or Leshy, which pretty much police the other houses and make sure that they aren't doing things, killing people, they aren't kidnapping people, they aren't going above and beyond what they're supposed to do. And they already pretty much have a wide bracket for what they're allowed to do to people. In the first chapter, one of the houses is cutting someone open to read like financial signs from their internal organs, and Alex is called to make sure that, you know, they get sewn up nicely and they go to the hospital and they don't get killed. So that's pretty much her job. There was a recent murder of a girl at Yale whose name was Tara, and Alex becomes strangely obsessed with solving her murder and not letting the powers that be that are used to getting away with things because they have influence and money, not letting them get away with what they did to her. Her mentor at Yale is a guy called Daniel, what was it? Darlington, Daniel Darlington, and he has recently disappeared. We go back and forth in time a bit between present day Alex at Yale versus when she was a child, when she first started to see Grays, some of the really horrific encounters that she had with them. First meeting Daniel, what happened to Daniel, how did he disappear, where has he gone, how Alex's path started leading her into trouble, the people that she was becoming involved in, what actually happened that night when so many others were killed and she survived. A lot of history is revealed as the story goes along and pieces start to click and things start to make sense and you start to see why Alex is the way she is. Yeah, I really don't have any complaints about this book. Honestly, I enjoyed it a lot. The writing was really good. I think Leigh Bardugo brought Yale to life and really showcased the mixture of maybe some of the darker undertones at Yale versus that excitement you get when you're at college and you're learning new things and there are so many like brand new possibilities that open up to you. The main character's character arc was really good and she started developing through the story in a way that I really enjoyed. I was worried that it might feel, the dark academia portion might feel a bit congested to me because sometimes they kind of veer towards that, but it didn't at all. Everything was easy to follow. Everything made sense. 4-star book. We are on a roll. I think I'm gonna read the short one, the short one next. In the interest of complicating the system I currently have even further, I am going to allow myself this month for every book I read to get 2 books onto my shelf because I've got piles on the floor. I've got my bookshelf over there of books that I've hauled but haven't been able to get on yet. I've talked about this in many previous videos. The shelves are looking a bit sparse. I need to start filling them up. So I'm going to choose, I've read 3 books so far. I'm going to choose 6 books to get onto the shelf. I do have an idea of a video I want to do soon where I make some progress on unfinished series. So with that in mind, we're going to do It Starts With Us by Colleen Hoover. We're going to do The Mystery Guest by Nina Prose. We're going to do Ruthless Vows by Rebecca Ross. So excited to read this book. And then, not a series, randomly, Juniper and Thorn. That's 4. And then we're going to do Fourth Wing and Iron Flame because they're chunky books and I just want to get them up there. Those are the 6 books that are going to get on my shelves. I have 3 more books to read this month, which means I will choose 6 more. And that's pretty good progress. That's 12. And then also in turn, I need to get books from the floor, Lord, onto my temporary shelf. So let's choose 6 books real quick. I'm just going to choose them from the pile. Never by Jessica Hastings. This is a Peter Pan, Captain Hook retelling. City of Stardust. Don't know what it's about, but the cover's gorgeous. Nowhere, which is a horror book. The Vanishing Stair. I have the first book in the series. I think this is the second. The Wolf Den, which is a mythology book I've really wanted to read. And then Powerless, which is a fantasy, first book in a fantasy series. I've heard a lot of mixed reviews about it, so I'm super curious. These are the books that are going onto my temporary shelf. Once I read more books, I can then move them from my temporary to my permanent. Okay, I'll be back with This Is How You Lose the Time War, and we'll see if the 4-star streak continues. Hey guys, welcome. It is time to wrap up my May reading. I've got a little bit of caffeine here to get me going. I'm ready to talk about my final 2 books. I set a goal this month to read the 6 books that have been on my TBR the longest. I read 5. I was not able to get to The 7 Husbands of Evelyn Hugo, unfortunately. This is one of the ones that I was most excited to read. I do need to make this a priority. I'll get to it hopefully soon, but I did read 5 books that have been on my Goodreads TBR for way too long. We already talked about When We Were Orphans, we talked about Hamnet, and we talked about not you yet, Ninth House. So I did read as well, The Maidens and This Is How You Lose the Time War. One of them was my highest rated book of the month, and one of them was the lowest. So, first, let's talk about The Maidens, because, funnily enough, this book and come here. This book are both about a murdered girl named Tara, which is a weird coincidence to read back to back. This book I did give the 3 stars to. Not a bad book. I did enjoy some aspects of it, but I think a lot of this is I went into it with maybe slightly distorted expectations of the book. I thought there was going to be a lot more tension, danger, suspense, a bit of action, and it was not quite that. So this is about a psychotherapist, I believe, whose name is Marianne, and she lost her husband a year ago. They went on vacation and he ended up drowning. So she is still dealing with that loss. Now, Marianne has a niece that she largely takes care of, whose name is Zoe. Zoe is attending Cambridge University. And I think Marianne is just like on campus visiting her niece, or does Tara get murdered and then Zoe calls her and she visits? I can't remember. But they both end up on the campus, and Zoe is very affected by this murder, even though she wasn't really friends with the girl. While she's on campus, Marianne meets Professor Fosco, I think his name is, who teaches literature, Greek mythology, something like that, and she immediately is like, there's something wrong with this dude. He's the killer. He did it. Like, she is so sure. Like, pretty much right off the gate. There's this group of girls, very beautiful, very successful, very well-spoken. Most of them are very wealthy, in Professor Fosco's class, and they're called the Maidens. They're kind of like his chosen circle, and he has like secret meetings with them where they come over into his office and it's just them, and it kind of raises some eyebrows. It might not be appropriate, but they're very devoted to this professor, and those are the girls that end up being killed. And Marianne, she's not a police officer, she's not an investigator, but she decides that she's gonna solve this case. And this book just has like the subtlety of an anvil. There are a lot of characters throughout the book that it would like to point the finger at and kind of raise suspicion for, like, this person might be the murderer. And it does that by like whacking you upside the head with like having them act the most suspicious that they could. And don't get me wrong, it had some interesting twists in it, but it did not contain any subtlety. It wasn't like you look back and then you connect the pieces and you're like, oh my gosh, how did this get by me? It was not that. Another interesting tidbit is this book reminded me how the main character was written was like an adult Bella Swan, and that all the men in the general vicinity were just like immediately obsessed with her and like in really weird and awkward ways. Like, it's very obvious what the book wants you to think. So one of the characters that the book might want us to consider as a suspect, the way that it does that is Marianne's talking to, I think, her old professor, and this person gets brought up, and the professor says something like, oh, I remember him. He was an odd one. He always had some, like, a bit of bloodthirst in him, which that's how you're going to point the finger and be like, he might be a killer. So yeah, this wasn't quite for me. I just felt like it was kind of clumsily done. And after reading the ending, like knowing how it ends, I realized why some of those choices were made, but it doesn't really make them any more pleasant or graceful. It just kind of feels clunky. It felt a bit clunky. On the other hand, This Is How You Lose the Time War. I ended up, look at all those pretty tabs. I ended up giving this book 5 stars. It was fantastic, which is really funny because This is so short that initially I decided I was going to listen to it as an audiobook because it was only like 4 hours long. I got about 2 chapters in and I was like, I hate this. I cannot stand this. I might DNF it, or I might end up giving it like 2 stars. But I was like, you know what? I think this might just be the type of book that I physically need to read and sit down with. So I gave it a shot and I read this in like 2 hours or something like that. Loved it. It's so interesting how you can have such a different experience with a book, whether you're listening to it or whether you're physically reading it. This is a book that needs to be read. I don't even really know how to describe this book, so I'm gonna try. We've got Red and Blue, and they are these like secret soldier agents of 2 different warring groups, and this is gonna span space and time. It's called Threads. So threads are like different, not really realities, but different time periods, different kind of mirror worlds, I guess you could say. And these 2 different factions like to send agents back in time, kind of insert them into history in order to pull some strings, in order that maybe this person survives or this person gets killed or this book gets written, something like that. And Red and Blue are on opposite sides and often are competing against each other in the same thread. So one of them might succeed one time and then the other one might succeed the other. And they're pretty much like the best of their organizations. They're very high up. And they start leaving each other secret letters through the years, through like millennia, and very slowly start falling in love. But they can't be together. And it goes through like portions of their missions and then subsequently the letter that they leave each other. It is so beautiful. Oh my goodness. It was so emotional. The writing was amazing. It has that very like dreamlike quality to the writing where there's not a lot that's concrete. Everything is kind of like wispy. It kind of reminded me of On Earth We're Briefly Gorgeous by Ocean Vuong, but I had the opposite reading experience with those 2 books. With that one, it was like the poetry just kind of felt forced and more academic, whereas this one, it just flowed so well. It was so good. Let me see if I can like find a few little tidbits. I appreciate your subtlety. Not every battle is grand, not every weapon fierce. Even we who fight wars through time forget the value of a word in the right moment, a rattle in the right car engine, a nail in the right horseshoe. It's so easy to crush a planet that you may overlook the value of a whisper of a snowbank. But I look at you, Red, and see much of myself, a desire to be apart, sometimes, to understand who I am without the rest. It is difficult, it is very difficult to befriend where you wish to consume. I am more sensitive to your footsteps, I think, than anyone alive, and everyone is alive somewhere in time. I mean, it's just like, it turns into like love poetry, back and forth, very ethereal. It's set on the backdrop of like eternity pretty much. And it's just, you should read this book. Just do yourself a favor and read it. Few things do, you know, belong to me. In garden, we belong to one another in a way that obliterates the term. It was 5 stars. 5 stars. It was so amazing. I loved it so much. If you made it to the end, thank you for sticking with me, guys. Made some progress on books I really should have read by now, and now I have, and I can focus on more books I really should have read by now. Okay, real quick, I was a little overeager, and I forgot that I need to put books from my turntable onto my major shelves, and from the floor onto my little turn shelves. So I have chosen those books. We're going to do Welcome to the Gyeongnam-dong Bookshop. We're going to do Magical Girl Retires. We're going to do Temple Alley Summer. and If I Had Your Face. Those are going onto my main shelves. Onto the other shelves, we're going to do Happy Place. I've only read one book by this author. We're going to do Pieces. We're going to do Hollow Kingdom and Lessons in Chemistry. So we've got a very colorful bunch here going onto the shelves. And now I'm done. Now I'll see you guys next month. Bye.